Let's come to the most exciting part, our fireside chat about alternative assets. Stewart, we can't wait to kick that off with you. And I have to say, I'm like, I remember when I actually read the newsletter from Trends We See, which is, by the way, a very good source to check out to get informed about latest trends, VC, tech, and everything. Yeah, I remember I read this article about alternative assets, and then some, like some speakers are always, or some people are always featured. And I read your name. I was like, I know this guy, right? I remember that we met you in 2019 in our masterclass, actually back in Bangkok. And yeah, you were definitely one of the most fun people to hang around, but obviously also someone from whom it is very, very interesting to just learn. So maybe before we dive into like the whole like setting of alternative assets, maybe let's just start with a personal background about your experience over the last years. So just handing over to you, Stewart.
Of course, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. Obviously, a little bit later. I'm out in the UK. It's just going a little bit dark, so it's tea time. If you see me taking a drink, it's not a big glass of wine or anything. It's actually some Vimto. It's some juice. So don't worry, I'm not going too crazy. And yeah, thanks for inviting me. And yeah, great introduction. So background is I was 50 this week. I know I don't look it, but I was 50. So I've been around a little bit longer. Got the chocolate cake out again. So I've been around quite a long time. So I started life running a startup accelerator in a company called Sun Microsystems, which some people remember for Spark and Solaris and invented Unix. Some people will think, no idea what you're talking about, Stuart. Oracle acquired them in 2010, 2011-ish, something around that time. I stayed at Oracle for about a year. Oracle doesn't believe in startups. They do now. They didn't believe in cloud. They do now. But at the time I left, and the reason I wear flowery shirts is because I like flowery shirts. But when I was working at Sun, I ran a startup program called Startup Essentials. And literally the first deal I did was in a company called Last FM, and then onto Spotify as well, sold into both of those $1 million deals. I went to Last FM and they told me never to come back again if I was wearing a corporate uniform of a pinstripe suit and a tie, because everybody thought there was a legal team or somebody who were going to come and shut them down. So hence why I've wore flowery shirts ever since, a different sort of uniform. So there is a background story. And then for my sins, I spent around about 8 years working in startups. One was called DataSift. We were one of 3 licensees globally with access to Twitter's Firehose. I exited that and then went to Zendesk pre-IPO and built out a $10 million channel team there over about 3 or 4 years. Then about 4 years ago, I decided, I don't know, if I got to London, decided it's not for me because I live in the north of England, exited, did some weird stuff, set up a furniture business, bizarrely, don't ask, and then set up my own consultancy. So I now consult to B2B SaaS companies. And around that, I've just got an interest in trends and what's happening. I've always been nosy. I've always wanted to know what's going on, because I believe that's where you can bring true value to your clients, but also be ahead of the curve around it. So hence, I contribute quite a lot, open to any questions around stuff. But yeah, I have a bit of a background.
Yeah, especially since you have seen both worlds, right? So you work Zendesk, Oracle, these are definitely pretty familiar names, and you have been and seen the rise, and especially pre-IPO and acquisitions and stuff like that. Since you have like such an interesting, and obviously given your experience and age, like what have you observed, or like what were like the major differences when it comes to like the early stages of a startup, then you like the growth scale ups versus like the big corporates that you have observed?
Startups definitely work harder, longer hours, and get more value and sort of more fun from it. So to put it into, to be fair, to put it into context, when I was at Sun, it was, I don't know, 100 million trillion people work there. Everybody would say, you know, that's not my job and things like that. But it was a bit more friendly. In Oracle, it was more like they'd sell your grandma type of thing. And it was hard work, but it was challenging to get things done because you'd have to go through a process and sign off and approval. So my $2,000 pizza bill, I had to carve some of that into a marketing budget, get an external agency to pay me the money, but I had to do weird stuff that actually it probably is not for discussion ever again, but, you know, didn't make sense. DataSift and Zendesk, different story. Do whatever you need to do to get the job done. So, you know, I went to Zendesk when there's about 240 people globally. We were getting ready for IPO. We took about 80 million in investment. So it was a pretty mature company, but still, you know, there were sort of HR processes, but they weren't clearly defined. And you could experiment. So you could go, let's go and do a campaign. Let's go and do an activity. What do we need? Just a credit card and some inspiration. Just go and do it. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. Whereas in corporate land, you would start January the 1st with going to an event, a kickoff, and they would tell you what the year is planned out, what the strategy is, and you would deliver against that strategy. You wouldn't question it, ever, never. It was just, this is what we're going to do. This year, we're going to do X, Y, Z. Here's the mantra. Here's the messaging. And it wouldn't change because it's so big an organization. You couldn't change it in the year. And then you come back to January the 1st of next year. Whereas in, you know, the two startups that I worked for, you would change it weekly or monthly if you had to. It was just literally, no, it's not working, dump it. You know, it's just not happening. Let's get out of there. So literally at Zendesk, me and the marketing director for EMEA, I was channel director, he was marketing director. We decided to put on an educational type event, and we said, shall we do it? Yeah, okay, work together. Right, okay. We've got 8 weeks to deliver an event where we want 500 people to come, and we've got to get some budget. So I've got to get some partners to sponsor it, and you've got to carve some money out from Magic. And again, we made it happen, and it wasn't slick, but it was slick enough. So for me, I think, you know, the core differences have been that nimble aspect that you can do. You can go and test, rinse and repeat and make things happen very quickly. And corporates, you know, again, some of the lessons I learned was working with startups was bringing those startups back into Sun to get them to talk to the sales guys, because the sales guys had no idea what was happening, what was trending. And this is 2008, 2010. So I would bring companies like Spotify and Last.fm or whoever it was at the time to come and talk to the sales guys and talk about what's happening in the digital world, how are things changing, and get them educated, because they were just in a turret, you know, the high tower, no idea. So I still practice that mantra now. I try and get, if I'm working with large organizations, try and pull them out of those organizations and make them feel a bit uncomfortable. Go into a company of 20 people and go and see how that operates. And you'll learn how to do automation. You'll learn what's going on in the world, and you'll learn how to do things a bit differently.
Was there actually any particular moment, or maybe also a person who influenced you actually to decide more, to feel actually more attracted by the startup world, so to say?
Yeah, there was a chap in America called Sanjay Sharma, who was my boss. And basically, I'd gone to him with a proposal of, look, there's this Facebook thing, and there's Google, and there's this stuff happening, and we're still selling to Deutsche Bank, and they're buying Dell, and we're not. So can we do something? And he was, I don't know, he had some fancy title. Basically, it was just about looking at how to generate more revenue for Sun from different channels. So he said to me, you got 2 months, go out, go and research this in whatever means, and then come back to me. And he wasn't my boss at the time, but I said, right, okay. So I actually went out with a proposal, came back to him and said, I've been to Open Coffee in London. There's stuff happening there that you've got no idea about, but it's amazing. There's these companies. I mapped it all out, and he just said, right, okay, you're moving to my team. Here's how it's going to happen. And he sort of worked with my boss. And from there, he just let me be a startup inside a corporate, and he protected me, you know, in terms of sort of political stuff. Because I was going to London wearing these flowery shirts in the London Bridge office. London Bridge only sells into finance. They only sell into Deutsche Bank and financial services. They do not like people going in flowery shirts. It is not a good corporate image. But he soon changed his mind when we all got invited to go to Downing Street and go meet the Prime Minister. And I was a representation for Sun there and about what they were doing. So Yeah, I think, yeah, for me, he was, pivotal and sort of gave me a different direction. I still see people now that I work with that are still inside corporate doing, God, the same job. He did the same job for like 20 years. God, shoot me now.
Yeah, I mean, I somehow also feel you, because I also have a background in corporate and then slowly transitioned into, like, obviously with startup, right, it gives you such a good platform actually to learn about, there is a different world, there are different options, and it's really up to you what excites you most, because obviously when you realize your life is endless, like by accident, I ended up in job X, and then it's my choice whether I want to move on or not. And you also said that like 4 years ago, then you decided to start your own consulting business, right?
Yeah, it was because I live in sort of the north of England. I live quite remote. I live on a farm in the middle of nowhere. So there's not a lot of jobs around here that I could do, basically. I mean, there are now, it's changed. So I used to live in London Monday to Friday and come home. And I've done that for a long time. And it got to a point where I was actually, this is just not making any sense at all. I'm spending so much time away from home. I don't see my friends. I don't get to do anything. And I got to King's Cross, and it's a bit like a scene from a film of some sort. I'm sure if they made my life story, but I just got to King's Cross and just like, no, I'm sorry. Went in the office and handed my notice in. Went, I'm going. That's it. I'm done. I can't do anymore. See ya. I was quite a lucky position because my son's older. He's left, he's with his mum and stuff like that. So it's not something I made lightly with responsibilities around it. But yeah, I just decided I'll go and do that. And I experimented with some other things and then came back to, well, actually, for the last 10, 15 years, I've been working with working in B2B SaaS companies, and I know that aspect, and I've been building channel. So why don't I go and work with those types of companies I like working with and advising them and just talking to them and get paid for it? It did take me a bit of time to work that out, honestly, longer than expected. But yeah, it was the best decision I've made. I don't work for the man anymore. I just work for myself.
Yeah. But I think like what you're describing now is probably always like also the like what people have as an end in mind, right? When they start like doing a business. But obviously we all know that especially like the first years are also the years where you have to say, or sometimes no to friends, or you also need to work quite hard. So what is like one like advice, or like one maybe like, one of the key aspects you learned, especially during the first time of being a founder, that like kept being, or it helped you being motivated, and also obviously then achieving to aim higher?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think for me, it was having a goal or a target that I wanted to aspire to is one thing. So having a clear direction, stepping back and taking some time to think about, what do I actually want from life? Do I want to work 80 hours? I am a workaholic, so I'm a bit of a nerd like that. I just can't help it. But I get satisfaction from that. I like to read and I like to enjoy content and what's going on. But I had to step back and go, actually, what do I want? Do I want to build a multi-million-dollar business with loads of hassle and loads of people and such like that, which I didn't want to do, and actually I'm doing now in partnership. So I've now got 10 staff, and a whole different story. But at the time, it was like, no, what I want to do is go out and help change the messaging around indirect sales and channel partnerships, which comes with it with a fallacy from corporate land, which is channel salespeople just pull on the string coat of direct salespeople, and that's what they do. So I had a clear direction. I wanted to change that messaging, that thinking rationale, and prove to B2B SaaS companies that you could multiply revenue quickly through a channel model, and it wasn't what their perception was. So there's that component. And the other one was about actually spending time doing stuff that I enjoyed. So it was, okay, so I don't work on Mondays. Mondays is where I go out in my car, or I go, I don't know, for a walk, or I just sit and watch telly in my pajamas, watching Netflix. I chill. But it's sort of, carving those sort of components out, what I wanted to get, gave me more clarity about, right, okay, so I'll now define what the clients want to work with. Because if they want to work on Monday, just not going to happen. It's tough because I've got direction, I've got a strategy around it. So Whereas in corporate land or even startup land, it was literally, I'm being told what to do. I'm being told where to go and when to go and do it. And I have to be available 24/7. So I've always reported in the US. So pipeline calls on a Friday at 6 o'clock when I'm trying to get a train home from London is not fun. So it's having that clarity about what I wanted out of the business and out of life and blending that together. So that gave me the clear direction.
And it's working for you. I mean, you're quite successful. That what we especially know. But maybe you've mentioned it a couple of times now with channel, and obviously we know you also with the channel as a service tagline, so to say. Can you maybe, for those who actually are not familiar with that term, just quickly elaborate what that actually means and the work that you actually do with companies?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's not a sort of common thing unless you've worked in a corporate entity or a sort of large organization. It makes no sense to a lot of people. So it's just about selling your SaaS software. We'll just keep it in that context. Selling your SaaS software through a distributor or a reseller or a technical integration partner. So rather than having people in the office, we'll go old school, sat there on the phone or taking inbound, you have a third party externally that do that for you. So you'd have a channel manager, you'd have a direct salesperson, he'd have a quota, and they'd be selling to a territory. So they'd be selling into London or Manchester or whatever. Indirect sales, you'd have a channel manager managing 10 people that could have 10 employees. So suddenly you've got 100 salespeople going through that same sort of model and can accelerate it. Takes longer to get there, but once you're there, it's really easy to scale. And it's not something that sort of a lot of companies stumble into it by accident because they get inbound inquiries from people who want to partner because they've sold to a certain customer, etc. And they hand it off to a direct salesperson, and it's never treated correctly because they treat it as a direct sales engagement. So to me, it's just something I've done for like 20 odd years. But to a lot of people, it's quite new. The best way to think about it in sort of terms that are more generic is affiliate marketing. It's not affiliate marketing, but affiliate marketing is sort of the closest to a referral or an introducer that will bring you a lead.
Sounds good. Yeah, so let's dive in also a bit in like the whole topic of alternative assets. Maybe before we like start, you know, like also hearing about your background on that, like how would you, Stewart, like in your own words, like how would you define kind of alternative assets?
Yeah, so to me, and it's weird because it's something that's been around a long time in terms of people have bought and sold domain names on the secondary market, like since I was a kid. Well, not that long, but I like to say that anyway, it makes me feel better. But to me, it's assets that are just not traditional. So being old school, I've got some premium bonds. I'm not really a stock person because I'm crap at it, but you know, stocks, premium bonds, cash, gold, etc. You know, tangible traditional assets that people think about. These are just taking it to the next level and thinking, well, actually, I can sell. I've bought some domain names. I'm now going to sell them on the secondary market, or I'm going to sell a fractional investment inside of my wine collection. To me, that's what alternative assets are, and it's something that is a term that's sprung up and sort of resonated well over the last couple of years, but actually has existed in some format or another for a longer period of time, but hasn't just been given that sort of nice grandeur title around it, or got the sort of press around it that it has with some of the companies that have merged over the last 4 or 5 years as well.
And you already mentioned like domain names. We definitely need to deep dive into like how do we actually start looking. I mean, what's like, shall I buy my personal name as a domain? How is it like, what's the whole assessment and being like the value behind it? But maybe just name a few other, I can off top of mind, wine, art, watches, probably that's also not something super new because you have like the wealthy people always buying like those assets or sports cars. But like with the new trends on the horizon, like what do you think is like really hot these days when it comes to alternative?
Yeah. To me, the more exciting, I'm not going to say about crypto because again, it's just crypto into it's what it is. But to me, the more exciting things are just the intangible assets that you won't think about. So buying a Facebook group. So why would you want to buy a Facebook group? Mm-hmm. You know, it's an alternative asset and you may lose it at one time. But again, what people are doing is seeing that these groups that are created, they may have 200,000 members that are not really that active, but they're buying it for an email list. It's a ready-made email list. So they'll buy a dog group for, I don't know, Chihuahua dog group. Great. It's got 200,000 members. So suddenly you've got a target list to go and sell your Chihuahua coats to. So it's an alternative asset purchase that you've made around a business decision. And the same again with Instagram accounts. So we've got social networks that have created value inside their own ecosystem. And then as an asset, there's an external marketplace that's grey, because obviously you're not, terms and conditions, you can't buy and sell these sort of things. There's no legality around it, but that's what happens. Admin transfers take over. And then it's things like, secondary market on pre-IPO shares, music royalty, Reddit accounts, all those sort of things are really interesting. I mean, you've still got, like you say, the high-end handbags with this, I can never say it, the Vestaire collection, where you can go and trade watches and handbags and those sort of components. But it's about the sort of social side of things that are really interesting to me as an alternative asset. When I say about domain names, they've been around a long time. Things that have traded as alternative assets for a long time since a kid is baseball cards, or I'll say top trump cards, but baseball cards or Pokemon cards. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you already know about these things, are there, but it's just something that's happened. It's like Pokemon cards were crazy. I was talking about them the other day, to Lisa's son, and her eldest is 28 now, and he had Pokemon cards, and his mum threw them away and was going crazy because it was special cards in there that were worth so much money and those sort of things. So there's so much around it. I was reading, and I was in a discussion the other day about, I didn't realize you can buy forestry, you can buy timber, so you can buy timber rights, but you can buy a 10-year right of timber and get paid a dividend against it. So there's these components that you don't see as mainstream press. You see gold, you see stocks, you see bonds, etc. But it's just a whole, just a different world around it. It's just crazy. Going back to, was it Second Life? Was it Second Life? Like the virtual reality environment that was big in the day, like 2008, 2010. I'm sure it was Second Life. Again, so you could buy virtual real estate on there. You could buy a virtual house. Again, it's an asset that could appreciate, and then you'd sell it on. And same again, I'm on a farm. We've always had the aspects of farmland. It's an asset that you can buy that's not traditional and keep for 10 or 20 years and get paid a dividend and the rights of it. At some stage, it may turn into something you build some property on and you sell it. So it's far and wide. The list goes on and on and on. Go and buy an island, go and buy a tower off the coast of Britain. There's just tons of it.
But Stewart, are there like any marketplaces or any groups, for example, that match people, for example, when I want to look for Facebook groups, right? Is there anything that I could put in some criteria, right, that I'm looking for, and then I get matched to, some Facebook group? Or how can people also get started in like this whole space?
So one of the main sites is SwapD, and that's got an escrow service. It's got a verification service. So basically, you can go on there and buy and sell Facebook groups, Instagram groups, access to be published on Forbes, verified identity, and it's this grey underground, I say underground market. I mean, it's not hard to find, but it's a market underneath where you can do those transactions, and they take a fee. And then on there, you've actually got individuals, and that's what they do. They build Instagram accounts and sell them. And that's all they do. And they're selling them at $4 or $5 grand a time, and they've got 30 or 40 for sale. That's not a bad business around it. But yeah, SwapD is a really good brokerage type service that sits there for that type of thing, and it verifies the people that come into the platform. It takes the payment as an escrow service around it, and it's focused on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, those types of entities, and it's gaining more and more traction all the time around it. So you go in there and go, actually, I'm looking for a Facebook group about dogs, or I'm looking for a YouTube channel about X, and if there's some for sale, they'll give you details of the users, where they live, all the sort of data against it, how much they're looking for. You can bid on that as well. You can get people to create accounts for you. One of the big things that was going through at the end of last year was so basically getting featured on Forbes. You could pay somebody so you can get an article underneath one of the editors there as well. So again, you get nice backlinks around it. But I mean, there'll be other ones as well. I mean, if you look again, look at AppSumo as a platform. So $49, you buy a product, great. You don't like it, it's past 60 days, you can't send it back. Go on Facebook. Look at, I can't remember the name of the group, but there's 3 or 4 groups for trading secondary AppSumo deals, a secondary market. So you can buy an asset like that and go, actually, I know it's not technically an asset, but it's a piece of software, it's a license. But rather than paying $49, I'll pay $20 back for it again. So you tend to stumble upon these things within the sort of different communities and groups themselves. And SwapD is a good one for looking at what the trends are around, is there a trend over Instagram accounts for nurses or doctors or whatever it is. You start to see some indication of what's moving in the market, because more of those type of entities are being sold, so there must be some activity. So then you could then look at it and go, actually, if chihuahuas is a thing, what am I missing out on? Yeah, it's because there's been a new dog food come out for chihuahuas and somebody's making a killing on Amazon. So it's
and Verena also asked about like how to get started. Obviously, that sounds like you already are like super specific, you know what you want to look at. But I even think about so many people who have not heard about it. I mean, trends, you're either interested in it or not, or you realize it when it's such a well-established thing already. But if you want to participate or like even anticipate like new trends for your business, right? What would be your advice? And disclaimer, this is not investment advice. If you like super passionate and learning about it, like where should people actually go? Are there like really those niche Facebook groups then where you can engage, or Slack channels to just talk about it?
Question. I'm not going to push anything because I'm actually releasing something in about a month's time that will help around this, but we won't talk about that side. Again, Verena sort of said about trends.vc. There's the Hustle have got their trends group as well, which HubSpot have just bought. There's Exploding Pro, which is trends data. There's Meet Glimpse, which is trends data. There tends to be more of a push type component. There's only Trends by the Hustle, which is a bit more of a community, and Trends VC as well. There are other, again, like anything, there's Slack channels and groups, but they just get disrupted or taken over by, it's like going on Clubhouse. It's like going Clubhouse now, and it's just people telling you the millionaires and the brightest cookies on the planet type of thing. So with this, I think, again, it's sort of finding the pace or where you want to find the information, the type of information you're looking for, because you could be alternative assets, it's a core subject on its own, but if you looked at what trends were happening this week, so decentralized component, just whatever it may be, could be another subject area, and there's a weight loss research in that. So there isn't a simple answer or a simple go-to type of place. These pockets of information that are all over the place that you have to then glue together about what you're interested in. Yeah. For me, it's about what's trending in terms of just marketplaces or technology and such. But actually, somebody may narrow down and go, I just want to know why the hell this Wall Street thing happened and what happened in crypto. It's too late now, it's happened, but I want to know for next time when the curve is and what's going on. And a lot of the sort of stuff that's talked about, essentially the core part of the signal is just from Google Trends, just from searches, just monitoring those searches, seeing what's active, and then going, all right, okay, I didn't know about that. What's this alternative asset thing? People are searching like hell for it.
Maybe just to follow up on that, what you mentioned, that HubSpot actually acquired the Hustle and like the whole trends community. What's your assessment on that? Like, is it because I am part of the trends community, and I see that there is so much juice in it, and it's fascinating to see like there's a community. And like 5 years ago, you always saw like, yeah, it's like just people talking, and it's really an asset, right? But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this convergence of, large organizations, we're going back to newsletters are cool again. It's like newsletters were the evil, but now, oh no, it's cool. And actually, if you've got a niche newsletter and you can monetize it, it's even better. And I think it's interesting from HubSpot's take is they're buying into an audience. And I think we'll see more of these over the next 12 months of communities being purchased and wrapped up into publishing houses or companies. Essentially, it's hard. HubSpot is a great CRM marketing tool, but it's an awesome content manufacturer. Its content it pushes out is high quality all the time. So I think, from my side, I think we're going to see more of those taking place and starting to accelerate, and it being cool again to be in a community, newsletters. And I think part of that has been driven by the fact that we're at home for a year. We've got more time to do stuff that we can't do in the office, but now we can, and we can start to research and gain information. Hence why I've got an 11-foot piece of graffiti behind me, because I found these online auctions that were amazing that I didn't realize about. That, oh no, there's more to eBay. I don't have to actually go to an auction house. But people have got more time to take on board information, start to research stuff, but also then set up their own businesses around it. So talking to a chap the other day, he set up an MBA in consulting. He's got a little consulting community. It's about 50 members. It's accelerating. He's going to hand it over to a community member. Communities around swapping websites. They're all just hopping and popping all over the place, and people are signing up to around it. So I think we'll definitely see more of those acquisitions going on over time. And I think again, with the move back to audio, with the likes of Clubhouse and sort of podcasts going live, more of a transition around that, and even a push back to asynchronous interviews taking place. So it's not a live podcast; it's an asynchronous conversation that happens over audio. You wrap it into a podcast and you publish it.
Yeah. I would also love to go back to what you said like earlier, in terms of, I think a lot of people, when they have like in mind, like stuff like stocks, bonds, like these traditional stuff, but especially this intangible assets, as we said, like Instagram accounts, stuff like this, it's not so mainstream yet. Obviously there are a lot of people, but it's also still quite a new topic. So why do you think like it's so, why do you think it is not mainstream yet? And do you think it has like something to do that it, like this whole trend just started like later, or what would you say?
I think it just started later on, and it's still, it's not caught mainstream eyes, because why would you want to buy an Instagram account? It's like, right, okay, well, I haven't got a business selling Chihuahua coats, and I haven't got an online e-commerce business, and the same with Facebook. So, sometimes you have to be in that rationale. Whereas if I'm on Shopify and I've got a store smashing it, selling my, Chihuahua coats, I need to consistently think about ways to monetize and get new customers. And I may then start to think, well, actually, I've built this Instagram account. I've got 500 people. That's great. What else can I do? And you start to look for that component, buying an Instagram account, buying a Facebook group, and you'd sort of fall over the cliff into it until actually it becomes sort of mainstream, and it's in the press, or it's in communities and groups online that are just, I call them sort of, I say the word mainstream, and I mean that politely, but just, general information. When it gets to a point where it's on a Reddit group and it's getting lots of attention, that's when it starts to go out into the outside domain, and people go, oh, right, okay, not heard that, but I get it now. Whereas at the moment, I think it's based on the commercialization of what you need to do or how you need to reach out there. So for me, I've looked at buying some podcasts. I've looked at buying some Facebook groups that were related to SaaS, basically. So I could build an audience, because I've just done this partnership around direct sales and channel sales, and hence why we've now got 10 people around it. But we need to then build that funnel and target our customer. Well, the quickest way to do that is buying into an audience around it. And, similar around, with buying websites or that component, like Empire Flipper have been selling them for years. it's the same thing. You're buying traffic, you're buying into an audience, and you're just doing it quickly. But it's still an asset, because once you finish with it, you can sell it as long as you don't kill it, or you can add value to it. And that's all that has been happening over the years with, Empire Flippers. We're flipping websites 10 years ago. It's the same thing now. It's just that it's moved on into a different asset class, and got wider because we've now got more platforms that you can sell. So, Facebook is Facebook, but now you can actually sell TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all these sort of components, or buy. The idea of buying a podcast 5 years ago, people laugh at you. Now, oh yeah, okay. Well, Joe Rogan has just done 100 million with Spotify. So if I can buy a podcast that's got an audience that's growing, and then I can sell it in 3 years' time, perfect.
And what would you actually say, like for founders out there, what are also the opportunities for them to get started into the whole scene? Even though maybe they don't have a side business that is related to like in your case with the sales, but maybe they're just generally interested in making this an opportunity for themselves. How would you, or what would be your advice here to get started there as a founder?
I'll come at that sort of a couple of ways. So as a founder, I'd be looking at this going, okay, if I've built a team and I've got a marketing, even if it's 2 people, it doesn't matter if it's 2 people or 200 people, but are my team and staff and whole organization looking at these different assets as a way of gaining audience? Or are they just basically thinking about inbound SEO, build some content, put it through the machine factory? That's the way it is. Because if they are, then they're dead in the water, because the competitors are already looking at these assets and going, actually, yeah, if we can buy a YouTube channel that will drive traffic, or Instagram, it becomes an asset on the books that they've got that potentially they can then sell at a later date through the business around that. But it's actually about driving the audience. It's building that sort of ring fence, protecting them straight away, and building liquidity in the business around that. But also, if they're thinking about, well, actually, I want to start sort of diversifying my portfolio, they've probably already, if they're a founder or a smart cooking and made some sensible investments, it's starting to diversify and think, well, if I want to put 25% of my liquidity, I'm going to put it in crypto. I'm going to put it in buying some sites that can make some money. I'm an intelligent person. I've built this organization. I can do that on the side. Or the model I've looked at is you just build it as a factory. So you build it as a side hustle with, you're buying the sites, you contracting people that can add value and increase that site's user base, and then you sell it on, you flip it in 6 months' time. And it's looking at those trends. So there's a couple of ways to look at it around that. But for me as a founder, I'd be looking at going, I need to know that we're maximizing the opportunity in our business by using some of these assets that exist out there that we can buy into at a low price as well. You can buy a Facebook group or an Instagram account anywhere from a couple £100 to 20,000 or more. But I see it a way of leveraging and gaining more sort of business value from these types of things around it.
And what would you say are, obviously with every investment decision, are the biggest risks if you look at those alternative asset classes? Because for me, there are so many questions, how do I actually assess whether the Facebook group is full of spammy fake profiles, or what do you think in terms of risk assessment?
So part of SwapD, what they do is you have to provide the data on that group. So it shows where's the demographic. Is it made up of 80% of people that are from countries you've not heard of, but actually, you want to sell into the US, and 80% of that group is outside the US. It's that sort of thing. So the data is there based on the group and the profile, and that's what you sort of validate and go, well, actually, looking at this group, there's 200,000 people. 50,000 people are in the market I want to go after. So the value to me is X, and they may be charging Y, and you negotiate around that. But the guys and girls that are doing it as a factory, they're building it so that the audiences are very specific. So if you want to go into the Indian market, the audience is in India. The audience is in the US, or it's in Europe. They've done it as a territorial aspect and very focused in a follow unfollow type method on Instagram, which is to go and get the audience in the target country. So they geographically target people in India to follow that group and then unfollow them, and it builds up the audience aspect. So there's mechanics and the machine behind it to make it happen. It's not just sort of random type of thing. But again, the value is in looking at that data and determine it and making a decision based on that, what you want.
Yeah. I mean, also obviously, like these marketplaces are quite, like in many cases, quite international, right? But Stuart, do you see any like trend, or like in which countries like this whole alternative asset space is quite dominant? Like, and where are we standing in Europe or in the UK or in Germany in comparison to maybe some more advanced countries?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously the US from a geographic aspect is just massive, and they're, with StockX and a lot of the things that started originally on websites and such, that's where I won't say movement, but I'd say that's originally where it sort of started. But then when you look at it, it's now open and global. So a lot of the components that are happening are not just located in the US. We're starting to see sort of more coming into Europe, Asia Pac around it as well. But again, I'd say it's definitely a US type movement that started and is still pushing forward. And a lot of the sort of conceptual different asset classes that sort of pop into this type of thing definitely resonate from there more. Or maybe it's just that the US are quite good at sort of pushing that out and getting traction, whereas in Europe it may be quite contained. So I've been working with some awesome people and companies in Eastern Europe that are doing amazing things, and I've worked in Eastern Europe for it's about 2007, 2006 when I was doing startups with Sun. And again, that's, there's a amount of stuff that's happening in that region, but doesn't get spoken about or promoted because it just happens. They just get on with it sort of thing. So there could be untapped potential in some of those territories that we're just not seeing because it's happening in a regional type of component, and it's not being pushed out around it. A long-winded answer, but I'd say I'm not seeing sort of a geographic trend, but that may change over the year because, again, we're seeing some acceleration, some different components around this.
And if you now look, for example, like 3 or even 5 years into the future, you have the crystal ball. What's your projection, or maybe even wish? What change would you love to see in the world in terms of how alternative assets evolve?
That's a goodie. I suppose it being accepted and democratized in terms of, more marketplaces, there are spinning up, I've said about StockX and those sort of things, but more of a structured component around it. Because again, alternative asset is basically liquidity in an item or an object or whatever it is, but it can be based on feelings or abstraction. So why is this Pokemon card worth 500? I haven't got it. I'm pretending. Why is this Pokemon card worth $1 million? Because it's rare, but also it's worth $1 million because everybody wants to buy it. So I think, sort of more marketplaces that cater to those types of things, I think we'll see an acceleration in that, and also more escrow type components around that. So the tracking of the item, the validation of it, and then when it is sold, that tracking of it and the item is written to the blockchain, or it's written to something that is as an identity and follows it around, so that when you sell it again, you can verify. So ideally, I'd like to buy a Facebook group, it get written somewhere, the price of paid, and it be open, I add some value, and then I don't have to go through escrow or identity components. Just like, no, I'll sell you that. It's a Chihuahua dog group. You can buy it. That won't happen because it's Facebook and it goes against terms and conditions, but that type of thing where it's more open and accepted. Whereas at the moment, it still feels like it's a weird thing. It's like, why would you want to go on StockX or go arbitrage in trainers? What's the thing? Well, if you're into trainers, it's your thing. But outside of that, it's seen as a bit of a bizarre thing. Was actually, I think, it should be open to more. And then looking at portfolios and funds that actually broker into and buy into those investments as well, and open it so you can share the risk across multiple investment paths rather than just being stocks and bonds and gold and silver.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not so familiar with, for example, SwapKey or what you mentioned, but like in which areas would you say, you know, there should be more marketplaces in terms of, you know, like maybe different from Instagram accounts, or I don't know, like any kind of cards, but where do you think there's something missing here on the market?
Oh. Yeah, may need some alcohol for that one. I think it's places that are missing as such. I think it's just more about the maturity of them, because we don't know what we're missing yet, I suppose is the true answer. You know, there's lots of, like, you know, we talked about farmland, we talked about timber, we talked about old school type commodities, and then we've got the new world of social, but then we can go back to old royalty rights of music and those components. But there's still a whole world that we've not discovered because it doesn't exist yet, in a sense. So if you would have said to me 3 years ago, all right, okay, you can buy a TikTok account, it's like, well, why would I want to do that? I don't even know what TikTok is. It doesn't exist. It's that sort of thing. So I think you will see an emergence of technology and components that will roll up into elements that can be alternative assets that can be traded and sold, that have value and liquidity in them because of what they are. And that'll move, I think, more further away from social accounts, but also my gut feeling is it'll still probably lock down or go back to tangible items. So I don't know, buying a share of a racehorse, or buying a share pre-IPO stock, something that is old school, and there'll be probably some components that are a bit more radical around sort of digital type of things, but they're not that because I don't think they exist yet, in a sense.
Do you think there are also some like niches within the alternative assets that are kind of overhyped? Because to me, it seems, especially with sports cards, and obviously Gary Vee is always on in the forefront, like preaching about it. And I was actually on a call with also like a lady from another community, and she told me like today, hey, I know it's like midnight where you are at right now, but at some time like Eastern Standard Time, what is your NBA Top Shot is doing a pack drop today. And it's like, what does that even mean? And she's trading sports cards or anything like from the NBA with some rare cards, but I have no idea what she's talking about. But I was like, there is something. Is it just a hype? So, but what's your take on that?
To me, I think those marketplaces for high-end value items like watches, trainers, those sort of things, that's a saturated market. There's lots of barriers to entry. It's been done, and it's pretty dull because it's just what it is. And they exist and they're mature, but they're just, they're going along. And I think over time, there's just going to be a race to the bottom, like there is in any sort of marketplace. It'll be, right, okay, wraps everybody up, and it'll be is. But it'll always exist for trading cards or that component around it. I just don't think they'll be as prevalent around it. I think, to me, they're just sort of they're so last year type of thing. It's old school, and there's not a lot more they can do to add sort of value or innovate. How can you innovate some of those components? You've got a trading card, you act in the middle, there's an escrow service, you drive components around it again. But there's aspects around, is there something around esports and online gaming? Is there an alternative asset under there? Not buying territories and not buying your next machine gun, but actually buying into a team. So can you invest into an esports team and buy a component of them and help contribute to their success and fund them as you would a football club? Now, that may exist already. I don't know. But, is that an area where there's a direction to go and buy into that type of component so you can then sponsor them moving forward and own part of Stewart's Frontier Battle Team or whatever it's called, the Flower Team.
Stewart's background, art pictures.
But those sort of things, I think, be interesting. But I think, the old school stuff will just always sit there and just like I say, a race to the bottom because it's limited in its innovation. But saying that, trading coins and trading stamps been going on since they existed. So, and that still happens today. It's just as it is. It just happens.
last question from my side, not related to alternative assets, but just generally, like Stuart, do you have any startup communities or any mentoring programs that helped you getting started, and that you would recommend to also our community in Berlin, or maybe also
That's a good one. Mine, and it's funny because actually I do remember Startup Grind, but from like 2008, 2010, but not directly involved. It must have been when it was first starting and it was sort of coming over to Europe. For me, I was more part of doing open coffee type sessions and those sort of things, but also doing events that were sort of quite, I'll call them Londonized because they were quite specific. So I did an event, I used to do an event called Flowery Tweet Up. You had to wear a flowery shirt or a flowery dress. And we used to get 200 or 300 people every month doing weird stuff. But I think in any sort of startup community that exists, it's about actually people like yourselves that are driving it, bringing people together, sharing that information and knowledge, and making things happen. To me, any sort of community is all based on the fact of, you know, if you know Bob, and Bob's really good at building websites, and then you've got a founder of a company that's like going, well, actually I need a website, and you bring them together, and that's a relationship that's driving business forward forever. To me, that's what the community should be about, and it's about adding value. So things like this, passing the knowledge on, I think are the best things you can do. And if you're looking at any startup community, whether it's Berlin, Europe, US, or wherever, if it doesn't do that, don't be part of it. Don't if it's a pay to play and you've got to go in or whatever, and they don't do anything, it's not a community. It's a mail list. So nothing's springing to mind, but I like these types of things. I think this is where it adds value. It's best in person, so you can drink some alcohol, but also you can't at the moment. But these types of things where you can share knowledge and go, okay, and this is what used to happen to me. This is why I wear the flowery shirt is. Go and speak to Stewart. He's got hardware discounted. He's got software. He knows people. He buys pizza. It's that sort of thing. And I'd be like, right, okay, yeah, that guy over there is a developer. He's a JavaScript guy. He's looking for a job, and just making things happen.
Cool. I know that Giacomo also has a question, so feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll also follow up with my last one then.
Okay, thanks. This is Giacomo.
Giacomo.
I was mostly wondering about virtual assets, so the ones that are based on the internet, because I see that a lot of activities moving towards the virtual world today, right? A lot of activity there, and I was wondering if there is already a need now, and maybe in the near future, for having some regulation in this kind of market. So some laws that can regulate the pricing and all of that.
Yeah, it's a good point, to be honest. And again, it's something I was saying about Second Life earlier and that sort of thing. So, those virtual products that transact online in this sort of grey world. And again, this comes back to like future marketplaces. There should be some, I won't say regulation, it sounds too enforceable, but there should be some component about, again, if it has liquidity, it has the price against it, what's the value to you? That's what's determined. But also, then it has to go through escrow, and it has to have identity, and that identity has to be tracked. Because, if you buy your virtual castle and it's great, but actually it's not your virtual castle, it's a virtual horse that somebody's dressed up as a castle, suddenly you've spent 2,000 euros on it. There's nobody to go after. And that's sort of where SwapD is. Got a nice little niche. It has an escrow and it has a verification, and if the transaction goes through, they sort of endorse it and support it in a sense. And you're right, in this virtual collectible items, look at, I don't like saying non-fungible tokens because I can't say it, so NFTs. People are now at the stage where they're selling NFTs, tweets, art, going for silly amounts. But there has to be a digital signature against it, or a digital identity, because otherwise you bought. It's like buying a piece of art. You buy a piece of art and it's signed by Picasso. Yeah, it's not Picasso, is it? So I agree. I think there needs to be, and again, it could be a component where there's a regulatory body or a regulatory component that aids that transaction. When it does, it has to sit in the middle and act as the insurance company in a sense. and go, yeah, okay, that's the castle. We definitely know it's a castle. And this is why people like Empire Flippers with website flipping and things have just stonked it, because that's what they do. This website gets 5 million hits. It does this, it does that, and we'll we approve that, we sign it, and that's what you're buying into. Whereas at the moment, it feels like, even with Swap D, in a sense, I'm still skeptical. It feels a little bit Wild Westy still. There's no, and I'm a tight northerner. I don't like spending money. So the even worse is spending some money and then it's not right. It's forged around it. So it's a really good valid point, and I've not seen anything come across the radar which solves that at the moment, or solves it in a clean way that's more generic.
Thank you.
Do you have another question, Giacomo? Feel free. Use the time.
Sorry, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. Sebastian, Michael, anything from your side?
I was just thinking about the regulatory side that you referred to from a law perspective. I think most of these digital assets or alternative assets can probably be traded under common standards that we already have. What I think makes it complicated is that you most of the time probably have cross-border interactions, where if you get fooled by somebody, you have to go find some court that takes care of your case, and that's most of the times the problem. And so I think that's why it's a Wild Wild West environment where many crooks are probably also acting, and that's why you need some kind of trusted escrow agent like Swap, who takes care of these things. But I think that's not so much it's not a law thing, it's more a practical law thing. So not from the written law, but more from the practical side. How do you apply the law if you need it? I think that's a big issue. And of course, there's a lot of issues with regard to data protection. Not that I'm a fan of this type of law. I mean, this is different interpreted in the US than, for example, in Europe. But when you're, for example, saying you're selling accounts or groups on Facebook or on Instagram, what is that? Is that more, are you actually selling email addresses, what you instantly said, or is it, are you selling, or are you selling the access to the group in which you can then promote your products? What is it? Are you buying the email and spamming it? That would be a data protection issue. Or are you just using the group to subtly put your message in there without people noticing? So
exactly. It's so in that sort of instance, Sebastian, you're buying basically the admin access to that group. So if that group's been set up as Stewart@gmail.com and they're the admin, you're buying that email account essentially, which buys you access to that group. But it breaks all the Facebook's and Instagram's terms and conditions, because you're not allowed to do that. So that's hence why it's sort of under market and grey. And you're right. To me, it's about what is the domicile legal entity country that transaction would take place under, because in the digital world, that entity doesn't sit in a country. It sits somewhere on a server that could be in Iceland or wherever. And then, like you say, the practicalities of that get a bit murky. And it all comes back down to, right, okay, if this is correct or wrong. And that's where I think, it starts to become a bit more complex to solve that problem, because it's like, what entity you're doing it under from a legal perspective for those sort of things. And probably why sort of people have looked at it and go, well, actually, it's a bit hard, and let's sort of park that one for now around it. Because if you're buying that virtual component, it sits in a virtual world, there's no physical location for it. Well, does it matter if you do it under US law, or whoever sets up that entity is going to do it under a legal entity that sits in the most non-law abiding country in the world, so that they never get sued.
Right, and that's why you need these escrow services, I think. But on the flip side, everybody knows it from PayPal. I mean, it's the same thing. You're doing a transporter transaction, PayPal blocks your money, and if there's trouble, if the recipient says he didn't receive the stuff that was apparently sent over, you have to battle with PayPal, and they are totally free to do what they want. That's totally arbitrary sometimes, and you're never going to go to court anywhere. Unless it's a huge sum, then it might make sense. And to some extent, you lose your statutory rights practically to go to court and get your case solved.
Yeah, I wouldn't even like to think about sort of going through that process. I mean, it's hard enough with PayPal, but going through a process of trying to get your funds back, and especially if it's not gone through escrow, you've done it as a crypto transfer, forget it, it's gone. Don't even bother. You're never going to find it again.
Michael, any question from your side?
None here now.
Okay.
I would be, maybe just my last question would be, Stewart, what are you most excited about these days? I mean, we've heard about like the Chihuahua dog groups and the graffiti artwork.
Some paintings.
What am I most excited about is the moment that I can book a flight to go anywhere. I'm going to be excited about that, most definitely.
Oh, here.
Yeah, outside of the weird sort of COVID world I've been looking at, I use the term AI. I know it's not AI, but I've been looking at sort of the last month or so about automated businesses. And I know like Zapier and such like that, but actually using AI. So I've used Descript's overdub to train my voice. Done about, it says 30 minutes. It spent about 3 hours on the bloody thing. So I've now got my voice and I can do text to speech. And then I've been looking at video services that do automatic creation based on scripts. And the idea is I was just sort of testing through, can I take a piece of blog content, turn that into something that I can then put into an AI machine that creates the videos behind it. It also, I put my voice into overdub and it transcribes it as a voice and I overlay it so I can create videos like 5-10 times a day, put them on YouTube and monetize them. So they're called non-camera, non-facing camera videos. So you're basically just talking about stuff. So I've been experimenting with that, and that's part of what I alluded to before. I'm just sort of building a channel in the background called The Trend Insights. The Trend is, it's an Icelandic domain name, testing some of these theories. And there's another organization that called Syncrosis that basically you do about 30 minutes in front of camera talking. It then takes your body shot and your voice and basically does text to speech and turns you into, and you can just put on YouTube. So it could be like me talking now, it will replicate my mouth movements. It'll always have the background that I've got, but I can use that. And that's great as a SaaS company. If you do onboarding or training, it's brilliant because you just put some text to speech in it and suddenly you've got a person talking, doing your onboarding. You can trigger it through Zapier and do automations as well. So those sort of things, I've been playing around with AI and created art and non-fungible, and I'll just say NFTs around that. But the idea about automatic processing, creating video content from one piece of verbose into me talking to camera about something, experiment with that. So we'll start to see some outputs for that next month. So that to me is like suddenly, and I wrote a blog post about it, you can always create a business in a day. Startups know this, we do, hackathons and such, but actually now it's simple to create monetized content from content that is available in mainstream and sort of build that out and generate that as AI created videos with soundtracks and music that there's no copyright or commercial, and you can use some commercial use cases and do that sort of in a day sort of thing. So yeah, I've been a bit of a nerd for the last month. Client work has been on hold for a while, just while I've been playing around with this. And that's part of why I got into alternative assets, was looking at actually if I'm going to drive the audience, and would it make sense if I was going to do something about Chihuahua dogs? I'm not doing about Chihuahua dogs, but then look at groups and Instagram, or buy into an existing YouTube channel that's got traffic and re-divert that against what I'm trying to drive it for. Because again, the advertising rates on YouTube, if you're in make money online or financial services and such, are really high around it. And the rationale behind it is that I don't really want to have to sit in front of the camera or talk to the mic and do the components and edit it, if I can do it and just basically put some stuff in and just do it in 30 minutes. So yeah.
And you mentioned you have your own podcast, right? So how can people get a hold of you? Like what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'll send you the link. It's just channelasservice.com. So all my blog posts are turned into podcasts, and just about do a series around B2B SaaS companies. If there's any B2B SaaS companies that have channel people working there, please get in touch, because I'm just about to do a series of structured interviews. So the methodology behind that, again, is rather than turn up at 12 o'clock and we have a call for an hour and you've got to dedicate the time, it's about asynchronous. So there's a tool called Rumble Studio. Put a set of questions in. I then ask those questions and go back and forward. And then you as the podcast guest participate around it. And it's a way of accelerating getting structured podcasts and structured interviews done really quickly, without having to spend hours and hours doing every single call and every single one. So just about to start looking at releasing them. That'll be the end of March for that one. But yeah, looking out for any people that work in channel in B2B SaaS companies come forward.
Cool. Awesome. That is a wrap. That was so cool. Stewart, we need to catch up like over a virtual beer then at another time.
Virtual Vimto.
Thanks so much for sharing all those interesting insights. I think it's definitely a whole new world, literally. But something that is already existing. So it's rather more like if you're listening and watching like the recording right now, get in touch wherever you want. I think it's still not too late. Just getting started.
Definitely.
That's true. And also we are always looking for new topics, and are also always happy to consider your ideas. So if you come across a trend or something you want to dive into, just let us know. And yeah, we are always happy to make it possible. Actually, our next event is I think on the 24th of March, right, Mareike?
Mm-hmm. Correct, yeah.
With the team of Freigeist in Munich. So there it will be all about how to dive into venture capital, giving a right pitch, raising money, stuff like this. So if you're interested about that, we will, I think, publish the event in the next days. Yeah, but
and I think even we already know, even for April, we also will host maybe a short workshop with Soldo, right. And then obviously also like a legal workshop with BMH Bräutigam. So everyone from the founder side will be covered. We will take care of you. We got you. And until then, we wish you an amazing evening. Stay healthy, stay inside. Still, it's Corona time. But yeah, thanks again, guys, for tuning in. Thanks for asking the questions. And again, thank you, Stewart, for spending the evening with us. It was a pleasure, and hope to catch up soon in person.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.